Hello, everybody. We are super glad that y'all are here with us this evening. And I am here, and I think we are here to bitch about
Mm.
our. And I'm bitching. Well, he'll give probably his opinion. I'm bitching. We'll start off with the
Mhm.
opinions of my opinions does not reflect the people in the
Mhm.
audience. It does not necessarily reflect my co-host. Just saying.
Mhm.
So, and cancel me. Just cancel me. Don't cancel everybody else. All right. I sink alone. Anyway.
Mhm.
So we will just. So how are you doing, dear Ryan?
Oh, I'm doing very well. I had a great time with the iconic Hypnotic on the latest episode of Saturday Night Hypnosis. I had to duck out a bit earlier than usual, but I am here, and I'm sure we will have a great talk, Moira, about an endless war, if ever there was one. A war as old as the modern world itself. So,
Soon it'll be 100-year war.
mm,
I mean, it's already close to 80
mm,
because I mean a lot of this shit kicked off in the late 30s, early 40s, which a
yep.
lot of people don't realize.
Mm,
But that's something that part I was going to go into more like on
sure.
Rumble when I have a way
Mm,
of getting my StreamYard to connect to Rumble
mhm.
because they want you to have a paid service. So I'm
Ooh.
hoping I can borrow someone's paid service and connect them and do it that way because like some of the opinions I have on that would gonna probably get me canceled. So
Mm,
here we're just going to kind of talk about some of the headlines. Let me find it
mm,
here. See, I'll highlight entire screen because it's on something
sure.
that's not my normal
Mhm.
Chrome. So, boop.
Oh, look.
Oh, I might have to full screen it for everybody. Hold on,
Mhm.
which means I cannot see the chat, but do know I love y'all.
That
Anyway,
is a lot of tabs, Moira.
yes, it is. All right, this one over here, it's for something else, but the rest of it, yeah, pretty much.
Mm,
I always plan on only have like one or two, and then like more shit happens over there. I'm like, you got to be kidding.
mm,
So, as everybody can see, Hamas, those who do
mhm,
not know what Hamas is, it is considered a terrorist organization.
mm,
But again, to be fair, a lot of times what they call the terrorist is what the army calls the smaller army, to be fair.
mhm,
So, one argues one's terrorist is another one's freedom fighter. So, hey.
mm,
Anywho's, but yeah, Hamas sentenced 7 Palestinians to death for supposedly collaborating with Israel. I'm not sure what all they got involved in, but we're about to find out.
mhm,
So, a Hamas military court in the Gaza Strip on Sunday issued death sentences by hanging against 7 Palestinians accused of collaboration with Israel. I wonder what their, let's see, sentenced to life. Oh, 7 others.
mhm.
That was a lot of people involved, apparently. Were sentenced to life in prison with hard labor after being found guilty of the same charge. Well, I wonder why some got hung and the others didn't. That's weird.
Mm.
Let's see. I'm really bad at reading out loud, so I try to just kind of let everybody see it. I dig the face paint though.
Mm. I mean, the Palestinian resistance against Israel, folks, split into two, I think, in the mid 2000s after the peace agreement between the Israelis and the PLO in the 90s. Hamas are the ones who still choose violent resistance. They're based in the Gaza Strip, which is almost completely blockaded to the west of Israel, while Fatah chose a more peaceful solution with the Israelis, and they are based in the West Bank, which ironically is to the east of Israel. Yet they call it the West Bank for some reason. Ah, yes, the Jordan River.
Oh, actually, yeah. Hold on a second. Let me. That actually, what you said actually reminds me of something. Let me go find it
Mm-hmm.
in one of my saved videos
Sure.
about the violent, taking the
Mm.
violent uh, stance. Hold on a second.
Mm-hmm.
See if I can find. Dang, a lot of those videos got tossed off. Shit.
Yes. Well, of course, this situation is a special situation because if the Israelis use the democratic process, Moira, in the same way that is done, say, in the United Kingdom where I'm based, or the United States where you are based, Moira, it wouldn't be difficult for the Arab world to just flood Israel with Arabs, give them voting rights, and then the Jewish population of Israel would be voted into extinction. so to speak.
Honestly, lots of Jewish people used to live there long before
Hmm.
it became a state,
Yes.
and they seem to do just fine. The
Hmm.
problem was, and this is going to be an unpopular opinion, is when the Eastern European Jewish people started flooding in there is when the
Hmm.
problem started. Pretty
You
honest.
know, when people have experienced oppression in one part of the world and they find refuge in another, they tend to not want what they ran away from to come back on
Well,
them.
true,
Hmm.
but sadly, I'm trying so hard not to say some stuff and get me canceled. Shit. Well, I wish they would tell us on here, like they say they collaborated, but I don't see they're really giving us any examples of like what is specifically they did, because some people can get blamed for shit they didn't actually do. Let's see. Oh, okay, here we go. Let's see, detained, who was recruited as an informant. Ooh, to provide
Spies.
Israeli
Hmm.
intelligence officers with information about local gunmen. Ooh, yeah, you don't snitch. That's not good.
Hmm.
Of course, they might have threatened his family. I mean, it's pretty
Hmm.
savage, the whole thing. Some of this is from like years ago. Like, dang.
Well, we are dealing with two main groups that neither of them abide by what we would call Western values. They don't really believe in democracy. They don't really believe in freedom.
You're
They're
absolutely. Oh yeah, you're right. Because actually, that's going to come into play in one
hmm,
of these tabs,
hmm,
actually, because they decided they're going to get rid of.
hmm,
Yeah, of course, America is going to call it the attacks in Israel from the West Bank terrorism.
hmm,
America is the number one fucking terrorist, darn near.
hmm.
Yes, I said it. People can be mad all they want.
And of course, this conflict in its current form goes back to the end of the Second World War, when British Palestine, as it was called then, was divided into two, divided between Israel and Palestine. The Arabs rejected that, and the entire Arab world invaded Palestine. They outnumbered the Israelis at least 10-1, and they had modern technology in the form of Soviet weapons and Soviet tanks. Yet the Israelis organized, they rallied around their territories and pushed the Arabs back. And that's how the current borders for the state of Israel exist. They have expanded and contracted over the decades
That much contracting.
as Israel has attacked Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Egypt. Most of the time they win, but sometimes they have lost, especially against Egypt during the Yom Kippur War. But yeah, most of the time, folks, Israel wins. But it's the irresistible force facing the immovable object, because the Palestinians just won't quit, so to speak.
Yeah.
Hmm.
All right. So then we got this mess right here. Israeli minister brushes off U.S. terrorism label for suspected settler killing.
Hmm.
So an Israeli official brushed off on Tuesday the rare U.S. use of the term terror attack to condemn the killing of a Palestinian. Wow, I'm surprised America's actually saying that. Usually
Hmm.
they just absolutely kiss their ass.
Well, the Democrat Party does have some elements within it that are anti-Israel, far more so than in the Republican Party. And since the Democrats are, well, they have the presidency,
Honestly,
they.
everybody kind of shifts around. Like the
Hmm,
Democrat Party was all about Israel until
hmm,
Republicans started really like kissing the ass of it, and they're like, eh.
hmm. I
But yeah,
think I,
here in
I
Oklahoma especially, they are
hmm.
super pro-Israel.
Well, I think personally with the Democrats, as they've become more diverse, they've accepted more well, traditionally non-American voters and politicians who are far more hostile to Israel. That's how the change has taken place, and I think it'll get worse. I think the hostility to Israel among Democrats will get stronger as they become more culturally diverse, as they accept people, especially from the Arab world, who live in America.
Apparently,
Mm,
yeah, apparently they arrested 2 Israeli settlers
mm,
because they killed a 19-year-old Palestinian.
mm,
It's always a shame when the young end up dead.
mm.
It's a shame for anybody, but it's always a little worse when it's a kid. But yeah, there was just like, where is it? This is a headline people might find a little wild, but it is a bit of an apartheid over there.
Mm. There are a good few similarities between Israel and South Africa, although the Israelis are a bit more covert about it. Their democratic process ensures that the Jewish majority, which is a slight majority, is able to maintain power. The argument the Israelis make is a simple one. If it was a democracy like the United States or the United Kingdom, they would get outvoted by Arabs. An Arab government would gain power in Israel and then create laws, rules, and regulations that would stigmatize and ultimately do in Jewish people. So that's why they have the system they have to protect their own
Uh,
at the cost of other people.
well, they kind of well, it didn't help that they basically invaded that country.
Mm,
But the natural born Israelis that lived there, they lived fine there and for a long time before
mhm,
like the Eastern European ones came.
yeah.
And that's when a lot of the like I said, a lot of the shit hit the
Mm.
fan. And
The big problem.
I do
Well,
see.
I
Huh?
just say that the big problem when it comes to the territory was that before the Second World War, Palestine, as it was called, was not its own nation. It was either controlled by the British, and before that, the Ottomans, and then a long time before that, it was scattered and ruled by all sorts of different petty kingdoms, and then before them, the Romans, and so on
We
and
know that
so
the British
forth.
take over something, they always screw it up.
Yes, yes. We always like to divide things in two and then run like hell. India, Palestine, and Ireland. So
Mm-hmm.
there's that. Mm,
Here you go. So this is from a few days, well, about a week or so ago.
hmm
And so Benjamin Netanyahu
mm,
moves ahead with the next element of his plan to take power from the Supreme Court. When I first saw that headline, I nearly shit. I thought they meant ours. I was like, what? Because I mean, I know it sounds dumb, but it never dawned on me they had a Supreme Court, I guess. But
mm,
yeah, so he's the Prime Minister of Israel is planning on taking power from the Supreme Court there, so he can
hmm
do whatever he wants. And people were pissed. Even the other government officials were walking out. I can't imagine as much damage as they've been doing, even having a Supreme Court. I can't imagine what they're going to be like without one. Can you
Well,
imagine what would happen to any other, like any of our countries, if they
mm.
decided to just do away with the Supreme Court? Holy shit!
Well, for the United Kingdom, there was a time when we never had a
Right.
Supreme Court. We had a House of Lords. We had law lords who would be the judiciary because it was all linked. Because without having control of these different areas, you couldn't govern. With the U.S., it's a different system. With the U.S., the judiciary is a check and balance on the executive and legislature to make sure that their rules and regulations don't violate the Constitution. And it's very similar with Israel. So, getting rid of the Supreme Court for Israel is a good way for the government, the executive, to get rid of a speed bump which could hamper their current and future policies. Mm.
I just always imagined if somebody's being legit, they shouldn't have to get rid of the Supreme Court.
Mm. Well, when you're in a rush, Moira, you tend to get rid of things that get in your way.
Yeah, that's
Mm.
kind of scary. See,
Mm. That's
I'm part.
why during times of peace and stability, nothing seems to get done. It's because of these I call them speed bumps. You know, these checks and balances to make sure what you're proposing is going to be beneficial. But that takes time to vet, and that's why in politics it takes so long to get anything done because each rule and regulation supposedly has to go through all these checks and balances. So there is an advantage to getting rid of these checks and balances when you want to get things done. But there is a consequence to that.
Yep,
You know, you rush
my
things
dad.
through
My
And
dad was always a fan of that saying that absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Definitely.
I'm sort of like letting people read this just because, like, you know, I don't know if they can get me for like having it up there and the people reading it, but I don't know how they.
Scan through, ladies and gentlemen. Both sides have blood on their hands. Both sides are far from sainthood, and by Western standards, they're both barbarians. And
Now,
no
actually,
wonder.
I don't think that the Palestinians are as barbarian as I was always raised to believe, to be honest. I see a lot of parallels with that in the way the Native Americans were pushed off their land. I don't know how people can, on one hand, could go, yeah, that's horrible what happened to Native Americans, but then not be on Palestine's side. You know? It's weird.
Well, for a time where the entire Arab world was united against Israel, especially after the Second World War, when there was this great Jewish state in the middle of an Islamic Arab world, which stretched from Morocco all the way to Persia, which was quite the nail in their supposed coffin. That's why they gathered together to try and destroy it. And we're talking about 30, 40 countries going up against one country and losing.
Right.
This was a long time ago, though. And it's as time has gone on, these nations that supported the Palestinian cause have either given up, or they've made peace with Israel, or they've been destroyed. I mean, the countries, the main countries that made peace with Israel is Egypt. Egypt used to be very hostile to Israel, less so
Yeah, Egypt's pretty
now.
chill.
In
comparison.
I mean, Egypt is one of the few countries, folks, that actually defeated the Israelis in battle. It was a tactical victory, crossed the Sinai during the Yom Kippur War. They were pushed back, but it did force the Israelis to the negotiating table, and Egypt got the Sinai back. A few other examples of countries that made peace with Israel is Jordan. The Kingdom of Jordan used to be very hostile to
King of Jordan is a pretty boss dude.
And for a time, Jordan wanted to take over the West Bank because it was on the West Bank of Jordan, so they had a case. Countries that have been destroyed, of course, Libya, the Gaddafi regime. That's a stream in that of itself, and to a lesser extent, Syria, which has been turned into a
Syria's
damn
been a mess
wasteland.
forever. Like,
yes,
since I think,
and
but,
deliberately so, because it was one of the few nations left in the Arab world that had the infrastructure militarily to take on Israel. And if they had gotten back the Golan Heights militarily, it would have been far easier for them to invade Israel because it's on high ground. They could bombard the area and then just blitz straight through. That's why the Israelis have the Golan Heights to this day. It's a very strategic.
I wouldn't be
position.
surprised if a lot of the reason America kept fucking with the Middle East and regime changing and doing all that was to help Israel. But I think regime changes is kind of a shitty thing to do. You go in there, regime change, it ends up being absolutely, what's the word I'm looking for? To basically destabilize them in general. And they always do these subversive little bullshit they do. I'm like,
during the height of the Cold War between the United States and what was the Soviet Union, I mean, America's biggest allies in the Middle East were Israel and, surprisingly, Persia. And then it turned into Iran, one of America's, even to this day, greatest enemies, while the Soviet Union's biggest allies in the region were Egypt, Syria, and to a lesser extent, Libya and Lebanon.
yeah.
But,
yeah, Libya, like in the 70s and 80s, was quite a fucking mess. But like, as far as what they did back in like 2011 to Libya and to Gaddafi was bullshit. The dude hadn't even messed with anybody in decades. Like, he'd been minding his business. He was a grandfather. He wasn't even fucking with nobody. But what he was doing was he was not using a centralized bank. He was not using a centralized bank. Their fuel was cheaper. Their cost of living was cheaper. If people were getting married, they were given like a little allotment from the government to help get them started. If someone wanted to be a farmer, they were given land and allotment and stuff to get. So they had their own self-sustaining stuff going on, and you can't have that when America's around. They go, ooh, I think we should cause some trouble. And they fucking absolutely did. They don't want anyone to ever be able to compare to them and ever show them up.
Well, Libya didn't have the men. They are a big country, but most of it was desert, and their population was only about 6 million. That's twice the size of the population of Wales, where I'm based, folks. But they did have plenty of oil, and with oil comes money. And with that money...
There comes America going, I smell oil. I smell weapons.
And from a Western perspective, the Libyan money would go into all sorts of revolutionary movements, including the Palestinian Liberation Organizations. One of the chief financial backers of the Palestinian Liberation Organization was Gaddafi. And the same with Nelson Mandela's African National Congress. Gaddafi did financially support the liberation of black South Africans to such an extent that Nelson Mandela named one of his children Gaddafi, after the man who financed the resistance. So he was a lover of underdogs. No wonder the Americans didn't like him.
Right? Yeah, they didn't want a chance to have anyone that could like match them and put up a fight. So they destabilize and kill people. Like I said, the guy was like a almost 80-year-old grandfather. He hadn't fucked with anybody in decades.
Well, I think he died at the age of 69, but he did look very... He had a lot of plastic surgery, and he still looked old for his age. But in regards to Israel, they will do whatever it takes to survive. They're a very regimented, very militarized society. And in some sense, they're very similar to South Korea. Of course, as we all know, the South Koreans have to stay ready because they've got an angry neighbor with a lot of weapons. And that kind of way of doing things with Israel and South Korea, it makes them, to some extent, alien compared to the Western world, because they have to do what they currently do to survive if they are attacked. With South Korea, of course, is with invasion, or with Israel, you could say it's infiltration, because the Palestinians, they don't wear uniforms. It's like with the IRA in Northern Ireland. They didn't wear uniforms. They could attack.
They didn't have official uniforms, but they did wear similar stuff. They oftentimes it was like a dark green sweater.
Is Moira gone, or am I gone?
What?
Oh, you stopped speaking for a moment.
Oh, it must have hiccuped. Sorry. But yeah, I was gonna save this for the Rumble live stream, but I will. I'll share a little of it now. But some of what the shit got started after World War II, like freshly after World War II, the King David Hotel bombing, and it was a terrorist organization. Yeah, I'll call it exactly what it is. It was called the Irgun. That I'll go over here, highlight on that. But yes, they. Let's see. Let's click on this and see. So yes, a British administrative headquarters for Mandatory Palestine, housed in the south wing of the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, was bombed in a terrorist attack July 22nd, 1946, by militant, well, they say right wing, but I think it varies, because Republican in Ireland is not the same as Republican here, you know what I mean? But anyway, Zionist underground organization, the Irgun, yep, there, I didn't know they were going to mention them or not, and Jewish insurgency. 91 people of various nationalities were killed, including Arab, Britain, Jewish, and 46 injured. And that was in 1946, and they did this against the British being there. And what I think is interesting, because the British helped in World War II to help save them in Germany. And this is how they act. This is biting the hand that feeds them. And this isn't the first bit of psycho shit they've done.
No.
And so
we're dealing with people who will look after themselves first on both sides. Whether we like it or not, folks, the Israelis are only allied to the West because we give them exactly what they want. And if we don't, they would happily ask for support from Russia or even China.
Well, here's the thing, though. Like, they have infiltrated so much that we wouldn't be. It's like like a Siamese twin at this point, because so many of our top level officials have dual citizenship to Israel. The woman in charge of our treasury is a dual citizen of Israel. I mean, if you look it up, it's a shit long list. Now, how I feel about it is, if you're in a top office of some sort, an elected official, you should not have dual citizenship to anywhere. I don't give a fuck if it's like the Caribbean. I don't care if it's fucking Scotland. If you're in office here, this is where your loyalty needs to be, not somewhere fucking else.
Well, this is the thing about the United States of America, folks. Your nation was born in fire and blood, and so was the Soviet Union with their Russian Civil War. The great nations of history have often been born through bloodshed, through invasion, through direct warfare, and Israel is no different. Great nations, great peoples are forged in fire, as it were. And yes, he was.
I've been looking up documentaries about Yasser Arafat, actually, because I was going to add that on to my list of like complaints. So I think he was poisoned and killed in 2005 or around there. I could be off by a year, so please don't sue me on that one. And they wanted to exhume his body and see what it was that poisoned him. His wife was pushing for it because she was like, I want to know what happened to him, and rightly so. And guess who didn't want him to have it checked? His fucking nephew. His nephew was like, no, I'm afraid it would mess up the peace talks. That tells me you know who fucking killed your uncle, doesn't it?
That's the thing, because not
some people want peace at any price, and that includes the death of their own relatives. How's that peace?
Well, there were some within the Palestinian Liberation Organization that didn't want to stop fighting, and there are those who did. Although, as I was going to mention before that great comment, the United States doesn't really know how to survive indirect warfare. I mean, look at same with the Soviet Union. Look at Afghanistan for both empires, and for the United States, look at Vietnam. America is good at fighting conventional wars. It's not good at fighting indirect wars. For Israel, you could say it's the best of both worlds. They know how to fight a conventional war, and they are the best at fighting at guerrilla warfare, because they have this profiling system. They do have this. I call it apartheid light. It's not as bad as with the South African apartheid, but they do have it set where their people get preferential treatment.
Yes, Kronos, you can trust my links. That is that goes to a and I'm a cat. That's awesome. You trust me with his dog. But yes, this is a link to I don't know what it's not really a documentary per se, but it's this guy documents him going over there to kind of do interviews and ask questions about the death of Yasser Arafat. And people, and there's officials who are goons that start following him. They go through. He hides a camera in his hotel, and they catches them going in there and digging through his stuff in the hotel room. This and that, and this guy who's like dressed like a bodyguard, he's like, I'm not following you. I work security here at this hotel. And they're like going at it back and forth. And the guy who owns the hotel, or the manager, comes out and he goes, you don't work with us. And he's like, I'm security here. He goes, no, you're not. You're not one of my employees. So he gets caught right there. And it's so funny. So his other buddy's like, come on, trying to get him out of there. But like, they've been caught. Like, but yeah. And they've
I'm sure.
It's crazy.
Well,
yes,
I am sure, and I'm trying not to lose my train of thought, but I am sure, folks. I turn this into a joke. There's one group you can never criticize, isn't there, Moira?
Yes,
there's always.
Yes, and that's my thing. If you're not allowed to talk about it, there's a reason. Just like that shit they've been trying to stick into people for the last 2 or 3 years. If you're not allowed to ask questions, there's something wrong. You should be able to question everything.
That's why I do this. Moira, you could call it a dog whistle, because let's face it, folks. I look like a Jew, despite the fact that I am not a Jew. Big nose. I know
Dude,
Chinese
you're gonna get me in trouble.
eyes.
He's joking. He's being silly.
The hair as well. Yeah.
Dude, don't get my channel shut down. God,
Thankfully, I've
man.
already said this on other people's shows.
I know, but for some reason, I don't get away with the same shit other people do, man. Like, other people can show previews of movies on their channel, but I don't. I get in trouble. I get a copyright hit. Or
Well,
claim.
I'm sure I can turn reality based into a refugee camp for you, Moira. It's the least I could do.
I do have a backup channel just in case, though.
Good.
I should probably find that. Is everybody in the chat subscribed to my? Aw, thank you, thank you. Aw.
You know, politically, I'm a necromancer. I just go to the graveyard, raise everyone from the dead, and tell them to vote for me. Works well for Joe Biden.
Love it. I want to get shut down, but it's great.
No, just a bit of channel suppression. That's all.
Right. But yeah, I'll hold on. I will also drop the. Oh, did I close that down there? Shit, tell me I did not. Oh, okay, no, there it is. Okay, I just went to the wrong tab. I thought I closed it down. Like, no. But I was going to drop an article or the Wikipedia thing for the King David Hotel, so everybody has a chance to kind of get a glance at it. You know, read up on it. But yeah, something else. Oh, and I was going to be. It's bold. I was going to show my theory. All right, so I don't know if anybody knows the story, the rumored story of why a certain angry mustache man started going after the little Star David people. It was because of a building fire, the Reichstag. So I'll just pull that up real quick.
The origins for the hostility are not clear, so they are subject to.
Right. They said that it was a false flag by his own people to blame the Star David people. But since they have a tendency apparently to blow up hotels, what if it wasn't a false flag? What if they actually, in fact, did do it? And I know that's wild, but let me see. There was another thing I've seen where
the establishment back then for the West, because the Western world was one, not the, but one of the great powers of that era. The Western world was sympathetic to that administration, mainly because it was seen as an effective shield to communism. It better have a fascist administration in office back then than a communist one, because the West, led by capitalists, were terrified of communist revolutions doing them in. So Germany at that time was seen as a potential ally, less so as the years went by, to such an extent that we worked with the very people that we back then did not like in order to get rid of this new force. And it's good to see the Real Review 3000.
Indeed.
Fellow rising star. Yes.
Anyway, so this is a sample of like what's going to be on the Rumble. So the reason why I said maybe the Reichstag bombing wasn't an actual false flag done by the angry mustache man, but was actually people who he said did it, might have, is because apparently like a month after he got elected, or right after, Star David people all around the globe declared war on him and on Germany. This surprised me. When I had seen this on TikTok, I swear to God, I thought it was fake. Like, I was like, there's no fucking way that's real. But it
boycott, which was responded with a German boycott, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, sort of thing.
I'm trying to find a actual big picture. Oh, here it is, a big picture of it. And
hostility to Jewish people was a very big thing in Europe from the Middle Ages until the end of the Second World War, because Christianity was, and still is, the dominant religion. And Christianity, pre and post-Reformation, was deeply anti-Jewish, mainly because the Bible and several passages within it, both of the Catholic and the Protestant variety, even to this day, showcase what would be considered by current Western standards to be hostile to Jews. And it's in print. It's absolutely everywhere in print. It's in every New Testament Bible. So yeah, it was prevalent until the end of the Second World War.
That way people can see the headline correctly. But so yeah, the my brain's kind of buffering. Give me a second. My ADHD. I was like squirrel. Sorry, but all right. So like it's an odd comparison, but my brain does that. So a few years ago, truck drivers were super pissed off with stuff that was going on here in America, and they threatened to all stop for like 2 or 3 days, and that would disrupt the food supply,
cripple
clothing.
Everything.
Yes, and the U.S. government basically told them that if they did that, it would be considered economic terrorism, and they would be thrown in jail. So imagine, and that's just the truck drivers in America. Imagine Star David people all around the world threatened to tank a country's economy. That would be considered an act of terrorism.
I mean, the last time that happened in the United Kingdom was a general strike called by every trade union in the country. It was in 1926. For an entire week, nothing ran. No major shops, no industry, no transport, nothing. It nearly crippled the country. The imperial military had to step in in 1926 So
he was a full-grown adult when that happened. So he probably knew what kind of damage that could cause. Because he was born like 1886 or some shit like that, I think. I can't remember.
Yeah, this mustache man was born in 1889 and passed away in 1945. That's
what they say.
No. You see, the thing about Europe during this period, it was the end of empire to a certain extent. Many empires fell during the First World War. Europe was in a state of flux for about nearly 3 decades, from the late 1910s until the mid-1940s, which is a very long time. And it ended up dividing Europe into two, between the capitalist West and the communist East. The thing that the West fought against in pre-First World War turned out to happen after the end of the Second World War. So we see here a reaction to something that is clear to see, even to this day. And it went too far, just like all reactions. They always go too far because...
There's always an overcorrect.
Because it's based on seeing the hostility and countering it as much as possible. And the more extreme the reaction gets, the more radical, which bands everyone together against you, which is exactly what happened.
I do want to explain to the audience that I am in no way saying that what Mustache Man did was okay. I'm not. No. I figure I should probably correct and explain that part. I'm just saying that, like, because I was always given the impression as a kid, hearing stories, that he just kind of woke up one day and decided, I'm going to fuck with these people. You know what I mean? Like
this
man
came
out of nowhere. That's how I was always made to think that it came out of nowhere. Not that his economy was threatened to be tanked.
This man was homeless for the better part of a decade.
A homeless artist, yeah. And a World War I veteran, though. I will say that, because I think that what happened in World War I with the Balfour Agreement and this and that, he probably had some skin in that game.
In the most diverse city in the world, Vienna, the heart of the Austro-Hungarian Empire at the time, which was made up of about a dozen different nationalities, multicultural to the core, mainly religiously Christians and Jews, but nationally Austrians, Hungarians, Poles, Czechs, Slovaks, Croatians, Bosnians, every type of European. And it was that melting pot that we see today, especially in the United States, but this was before the Western establishment was in complete control, which led to this bitterness and resentment. And it led ultimately to this man fleeing this multicultural hellhole to what he believed was his home, Germany, and he was an Austro-Hungarian citizen, and he enlisted into the German army. It's as if a Dutch person would flee the Netherlands to go to Belgium and then enlist with the Belgians until the late 20s. The mustache man was still a foreigner by German standards. He had to get citizenship before campaigning to be president of the republic
I believe
at
he
that
was.
time.
Wasn't he elected chancellor? 'Cause I think he was.
Yes, ultimately he
Yeah.
was, when the administration had no alternative, but he was born Austrian,
Yes.
technically Austro-Hungarian, but it didn't exist. All sorts of
Much
it
after
didn't
World War
exist
One.
when he
Right.
came to office, but he had to get German citizenship because
Right.
Germany and Austria weren't
Right.
the same.
Yeah, I even have my thumbnail, like, as soon as I can get some, like, a way to get on to Rumble, because I can do it on Rumble, but I might want other people to join, you know what I mean? And so that's why I want to have it, my StreamYard's connected. So I'm hoping, like, maybe I can borrow, like, somebody's paid service and connect it. They can always disconnect it later. I just want to be able to do that part.
Sure.
And I even have the little thumbnail, if I can find it. I think you'll like it. Let me figure out where I've done with it.
We have to consider the fact, ladies and gentlemen, that a single European nation wiped out half a religious group
That's
in
fucked up.
6 years. And that kind of shock to the system would scare the living daylights out of anyone who survived that. To the point where,
that is wild. Like, that's definitely no doubt.
To the point where the ends justify the means for the survival of your people. No wonder Israel is the way it is, because they know that if someone organizes the Palestinians, organizes the Arab world together, they are fucked. It does not matter how many special weapons they have. It doesn't matter if they even have nuclear weapons. If the Arabs are fanatical enough, they will keep on going and they will keep on growing. It doesn't matter if they lose hundreds of thousands of people. They can take a bloody nose. Unfortunately,
honestly, you will find that with almost any group if they got enough chutzpah.
Well, you see that with the West and Russia, just as an example. Western nations can't take a bloody nose militarily. The United States cannot afford to lose 10,000 troops in a single battle. Russia can. I mean, if the United Kingdom lost 10,000 troops over the course of a month,
they'd give up.
You'd have massive protests.
Oh yeah,
for an end to the war. The Russians could lose 100,000 troops in a few months, and they keep on going because it's that different mindset. With China, no question, millions could die, and no, not a single protest. They can take a bloody nose. The Arabs can take a bloody nose. The Western world can't, because, well, the best thing about our individuality is that we hopefully value human life, and from a tactical point of view, the best thing about collective ideologies is that they don't value human life, cog in a machine, that sort of thing.
Right.
Losing a few million people is like losing an arm. We can always regrow it later.
Yeah. I'm curious what photos he's talking about. He said, "I'm surprised she hasn't screamed at my photos." Like, what photos would I be screaming at? Though?
Oh my!
Oh yeah, he was definitely a shit. Like, I'm not saying he wasn't. I'm just saying that, like I said, I always thought he just woke up one day and decided he was going to fuck with these people.
He was a reaction.
Oh, it was, yeah, I see what he was reacting to. Okay, I'm like, oh, okay. At least that I can wrap my head around. Like I said, not okay to kill people, but like it makes sense. Like I said, instead of just waking up one day and thinking I'm just going to wipe out folk for no reason. Like, what? You know what I mean? Like, okay, I think his reaction was definitely an overreaction, obviously, but at least I can see like a starting point, you know, a jump off point. And I'm like, okay, it helps bring the picture together.
It's hard to picture to people living today how terrified the West was of communism, because it's seen as a distant memory. The Cold War is long over. Communism doesn't really exist as it was. Of course, China plays both sides. North Koreans are just a fucking cult, and
I mean,
they're
you're
a
right. You're
contradiction.
right.
And everyone else is too poor to give a damn. But there was a time, folks, at its peak in the 1970s, communism controlled half the world. Now, during the interwar period, 1920s, 1930s, it was just in one country, but it was the biggest country in the world that was absolutely massive. A sixth of the planet was under communism, and it was just one country. That's why the West was terrified of communism spreading like wildfire, and they were willing to support a regime that was purpose built to fight it and destroy it. And for a time, they were doing that. But like
And
all reactions, it went too far.
And even the movie Oppenheimer
Ah.
touches on the Red Scare that was going on and how even people in where everybody was being grilled with an inch of their life about any kind of possible communist affiliation. Even Hollywood was actors were getting dragged up there, and movie producers, everybody they were gonna that was like in the 40s and 50s. They were just going batshit over it. And I'm like,
because the West, after the destruction of fascism, went back to where they were during the interwar period, that communism was the primary enemy in the 1920s and 1930s. It was only when the fascists started going absolutely insane that the policy changed, and it just changed back. And thankfully, the West won the Cold War, but that's only because the East collapsed in on itself, not because of any military victory. We have to understand that, folks, because the East fell because of internal problems. Now, only a few countries survived that. China did, by force. North Korea did, by starving their own people. Countries like Laos and Vietnam and Cuba survived because they
Cambodia.
tightened their...
Cambodia barely made it.
Well, Cambodia basically wiped out a quarter of its population and then became...
Yeah, that's not good.
And then stopped being communist. But the point is, it fell. The East fell because of internal strife, and we're seeing that in the West. It's falling because of internal strife. And, well, if the West does fall and collapse in on itself, where's Israel going to get its support from? That's the question.
I think that's part of why they do what they do. So that way, when they sever ties or do whatever, they'll be able to stand pretty strong. But you got also need to realize they are also quite a weapons manufacturer on their own. They could probably promise weapons to some country they choose to be friends with. Like a little small or medium-sized guy in jail is pretty hardcore, but he's going to make friends with a bigger friend and give him some of the commissary to help him fight the others.
Well, I can't see any of the BRICS nations supporting Israel. So BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And a lot of nations want to join the BRICS bloc. They want to call it BRICS Plus. And a lot of Arab nations want to join as well. Surprisingly, Saudi Arabia and Iran wants to join. So that'll be quite the union, because they don't really get along with each other. But I don't see any of those powers helping Israel out. And apart from them and the Western nations, I don't see where else Israel can turn to. And worst case scenario for the Israelis is that the West collapses through internal strife, while the BRICS alliance soaks up all of these Arab nations to join their union. And then Israel could be in a lot of bother, because taking on, say, Egypt and Syria is one thing. Taking on Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and all the other nations of BRICS, especially if it turns into a military alliance, that's something not even they can stop. And
that's probably why Israel has a lot of people infiltrated into our U.S. government, trying to make sure that nothing goes wrong, because they need that that prison friend to help fight people off.
Yeah, the United States
bulldog.
the United States is the edge for not only Israel but for the whole Western world. You guys are the only nation that can literally invade itself. Not even the British Empire could
Right?
do
And they
that.
they invaded everything. Almost everybody's got an Independence Day from those assholes. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And they, yes, but we can invade ourselves, and we have. It's
I
a
mean,
fucking mess.
without the United States, ladies and gentlemen, Germany would have conquered all of Europe. Without the United States, Russia would have conquered all of Europe.
I
And
think Russia
without
had a better chance, but honestly, I don't think that Germany was necessarily attempting to take over everything. He was only taking over a few places
Mm,
that probably got disrupted in World War One. Maybe he was.
mm.
I don't know what he was trying to do because history is written by the
Well,
victors.
when you're on a roll, Moira, you keep on going.
Sometimes,
It's like when you're a content creator, you keep on going, you keep on growing, and you go far as a rising star. But every creator has their time to shine, and ultimately, every creator fades away. That's Germany from 1932, when 6 million people were unemployed, until 1945. They literally went from nowhere to everywhere in 1939, richest nation in Europe richer than even the United Kingdom. They went from the poorest country to the richest country to the poorest country in Europe in the space of, what, 12, 13 years?
yeah, it was a roller coaster.
Hmm. And tens of millions of people died because one man took it too far.
And I must admit, like have you heard those folks that talk? They're saying they've calculated like how hot that burns those showers, I
Mm-hmm.
guess,
Mm-hmm.
and they were trying to calculate, and they said they could not see how that many people could have actually been executed. Like, not to say they weren't. We're not saying that like people didn't die, but
Mm-hmm.
because like the numbers seem to fluctuate. Like everybody's finally fixed on like 6 million,
Mm-hmm.
but like sometimes people edge over toward 10 million. Some say less. It's like 6 to 10 is a hell of a jump there, you know.
Mm.
But
The highest I've seen is 13
see,
million, but it's roughly divided between 6 million Jews and 7 million
and I
non-Jews.
wonder if that's true. And
Hmm.
not saying that it didn't happen at all, but what if it was like
Hmm.
1.5 million, 2 million people? That
Hmm.
sounds technically more plausible and more likely. I'm not saying that that's okay. Like I don't want anyone looking at this later and being like, "That fucking not no." Hold on.
I think it was the level of organization and the industrialization. It wasn't killing. That's the issue. If it was killing, it would be something else. But this was organized, industrialized. It was quintessentially German. Very well organized, very well
But
structured,
still, there's a limit
very
how many
well
people you can
layered.
put in there, and I mean, it takes a while for the bodies to break down. So, like, yeah, I haven't like looked it up, but I'm not sure how anyone can Google it to even. Hold on a second. I've seen pictures of that.
Mm,
Oh, I don't doubt that people were killed. Don't get me wrong. I'm not doubting that a shit ton of people were killed. I'm just not sure. I just don't know if it's in the 6 millions like they say. That's where I'm at. I'm not
Well,
questioning that a crap ton of people were killed.
what we
My
have to
grandfather
understand.
helped live. My grandfather and his brother helped liberate Auschwitz. So I'm not saying that it wasn't. It didn't happen. I'm just not sure about the numbers. That's kind of where I'm at.
Well, the thing about the situation, folks, is that the Allies, both West and East, were technologically inferior to the Germans, and that's something that has never happened since. The West, especially, has never taken on a foe post World War II that was a technological superior. So for us, with our 2023 mindset, we can't really conceive an enemy that has better tech than us, that's better organized than us, that's better disciplined than us, that has the better weapons, the better planes, the better tanks. So it's hard for people to imagine that there was an enemy that was so well organized that they had not only organized but industrialized murder,
Yeah,
not
that
just
was
in one
fucked.
place, but in multiple places, not just in Germany, but in Poland, in parts of occupied Belarus and Ukraine, and even in the Low Countries and France. We cannot really imagine that because there has never been a situation in our lifetime, especially for Americans, where we faced a foe that's been our superior in terms of war. I
That
mean, the
kind of
Germans
industrialization.
practically the
Yeah.
the Germans practically invented modern conventional warfare, combined land, air, and sea warfare, and they steamrolled through France. They
And
pounded
chemical
Britain.
warfare in World War
Hmm.
One.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And they for a time steamrolled the Soviet Union. So you've got to consider that they weren't just fighting one war; they were fighting two wars: the war against the Allies and the war against the Jews. And they saw they were. This is the thing: to them, the most important war was not the war against the Allies; it was the war against the Jews. And that is why, towards the end of the war, the Germans put more and more resources in special weapons, like wonder weapons, and also in their camps, because they knew they were losing the war that didn't really matter to them. So that's why there were high numbers of deaths, especially towards the end of the war. And it doesn't make any sense because, from our perspective, the conventional war was the primary objective, to end the war against the Axis. But to them, the primary motivation was to win the war against the Jews. That's why we have a different mindset. Exactly, real review. Yes.
Bone. Actually, I have seen a new cemetery belt. There's actually one up the road from me, and they're actually expanding on it. They've been doing it for a while. I don't know what the fuck it's taking years to do, but
Yeah.
they've been bulldozing a bunch of land and stuff. And I think they're expanding that cemetery. So.
I'm not a fan of cremations, but I know there's only so much land.
Right.
Yeah. Ugh.
Meow
I'm
and
not.
hinge.
Hmm. And the one good thing about the chaotic world we live in, Maura, is that you have the opportunity, although there are risks, you do have the opportunity to speak your mind in this day and age because people are so desensitized. People know it's a joke that there are certain groups of people that you cannot criticize, rather on the nose, wink, wink, nod, nod. But we take it almost as a joke. I mean, it's been so damn long. How can you hide behind a tragedy for so long to justify your current uh, policies?
Especially when some of the people they're going after had nothing to do with World War One or
Exactly.
Two.
Exactly. And that is why when people say, don't learn from your mistakes, you're doomed to repeat them. Well, there comes a time, folks, after a century or two, when they're not your mistakes to learn from. That's why every generation goes through these sorts of massacres. Less so during the post World War II period. But before the First and Second World Wars, folks, I mean, war was as common as breathing, it was as common as thinking. The level of organization and industrialization, though, did not manifest until World War One. That's why the West has tried so desperately to maintain the peace, and nuclear weapons has helped a great deal with that because they know if there ever was a third World War conventionally, billions would die
It is
just in the
called mutually
West.
assured destruction.
Well, I said I meant to say conventional, as in non-nuclear, because the
Right.
more you, it's like with a balloon. You blow the balloon up, it gets bigger and bigger, and it eventually pops. That balloon has been blow. They've been blowing on that balloon for about nearly 80 years now. It's going to pop eventually. I don't think it'll go nuclear because human beings like to survive, as a species. But when that balloon pops, a lot of people are going to die conventionally, more than the First and Second World Wars combined, because of how conventional warfare has evolved. So that's my view.
I think this was awesome. And
Mhm.
we're going to be able to stop almost right on the dot of the hour. Let's see.
And I will put this on me on other shows, folks. I have a playlist, me on other shows. I don't mind being controversial because the truth is reality based. So there we
Indeed.
are. Mm,
So I often wonder if they might have won if they hadn't. It would have helped. It would have
mm,
helped if they hadn't tried to invade a country that has 11 fucking time zones. It might have helped if they hadn't
mm,
done that. My dad used to say that was one of the reasons he lost. He spread himself too thin.
mm.
Let's see. I've been negotiating with Adam's family to open a new. What? Oh, I guess to you because he's been sub to me. Aw, thank you. Mwah to you. Anyways, but hugs to everyone. We thank you so much for coming by. Oh, do you want to drop your link in the chat just in case?
Well, you guys know where to find me, Ryan Roger Athe. I'm very lazy and it's very late. So yeah,
Because
hopefully
he's
you
about six
enjoy.
hours ahead of us. So yeah.
Mm, hopefully you guys and gals enjoy what I have to offer. Everyone is welcome on reality based. So yeah.
Good night, y'all.